All right, everybody, welcome back to the KSR YouTube channel. It's another day on the C5 Corvette. Not a Mustang.
Not a Mustang. Not a Mustang.
C5 Corvette road race car. And we're working on the door bars, which the day started out with a bunch of measuring. See, we got some tape on the floor here because the door bars are gonna come out to be almost touching the door skin is the idea. So take you along for the ride to do that. Probably gonna do the top bar. I'm not sure. Might do the dash bar. Not 100% sure. But do the door bars first. That'll be a pretty good effort this morning, and then see what all we get done. Alright, well, if you're not already a subscriber to the channel, please subscribe to the channel. We do have some merch also at winwithksr.com, which I've got one of our, I don't know what they call this color, but it almost looks pink on the video, but it's not. It's pinkish. Anyways, you can see we've got a pretty good bit done on the back section, like pretty much from the main hoop back is already done. And there's going to be a continuation of these bars across the roof. They're also going to curve up to fit right against the bottom of the roof skin to try and give as much headroom as we can, because both Grant and Chuck that are going to be driving this thing, and actually I might be driving it too. They offered me a ride in it once it's all done. But they're really tall. I'm a couple inches shorter than they are, but might have to have some more headroom than what it's how it works out. And the way this bar is, it actually comes out around the seat, like the seat is almost right here under the bar. So basically trying to give as much room as possible for the driver's head, but to get even more headroom, like I said, this bar will come up and curve to follow the roof. You know, we don't want to plan for it, but we need to plan for it. Planning is that if this thing ever gets upside down, their heads aren't going to be scraping on the asphalt, because there's not much strength in that carbon fiber roof. You know, if the thing were to get upside down, that thing's probably ripped off anyway, or might be. So if we can give an adequate cage protection for the guys, that's what we're going to do. And it's going to be kind of busy in here. Our door bar design is taking into account that they're going to be switching drivers, so we're trying to get it out as far as we can while still being high enough for side impact protection. But the larger we can make this hole, the better, because like I said, they're going to be switching drivers in these endurance road races that they plan to do. And yeah, we have to take a whole lot into consideration. When building a roll cage. It's not just a cookie cutter, it's a road race cage, build it to the minimum spec and send it. Now we try to be a little more involved with all of the cages we do, and we try to plan them out for them to be the most effective for their application. I think that makes sense. So we're gonna get to mocking up some bars. I'll show you a little tool that I use quite a bit of for doing stuff like this. It's called the cage gauge. And the cool thing about it is you can see it's got two different attachment points there. That's for I believe a 6-inch radius on the top and then a 5.5-inch radius on the bottom. And we're in the top because this radius is what matches the die set in my bender. So we're able to use PVC pipe and notch it and everything just like it was a tube. And then obviously it's got the gauge, you know, the degree marks on the gauge itself. So it makes it really easy for planning out a bar and kind of test fitting how it fits, because we don't have I've got a program that lets me do kind of some computer aided design, but where I am as far as that goes, this is still faster for me to do.
I'm doing CAD work right now.
CAD work?
Yeah, cardboard aided design.
There you, well, that's not cardboard.
It's close enough to cardboard. Same idea.
Same thing. So another thing that if we were to rotate these bends, like right now I've got them basically in the same plane, but if we were to twist this, it gives us a degree of twist because we could put our digital angle finder on this one, compare it to this one, and then that gives us an idea of how much we would need to twist the bar to make the second bend in it. Maybe it's a little complicated to understand, but they work really well. CageGauge.com, I believe, is where is their website. Is it CageGauge.com? I know it's called the Cage Gauge, so Google that. You'll find it there. All right, time for us to get to work. Gonna do a time lapse, bend up some bars, do some chopping, and then do some welding. See you back in a bit. All right, well, let's do a little voiceover on this time lapse, and I really sped them up for this video because there's a lot of, you know, kind of, this stuff takes a while. So there's a lot of footage here that I thought I would try to condense down into, you know, the time lapse for you guys so you could at least see kind of everything that goes along with it. You can see we've got our cage gauge out, and now that we've figured out how we're going to set up the door bar, now run over to the bender, get her bent up. It doesn't show super well, but I think there was a little bit of angle or rotation between those two bars. Maybe there wasn't because of how the spacing worked out with the bar landing back up on the you know, on the main hoop versus where it landed on the front hoop. But now that we've got that upper bar tacked in, Drew doing a little trimming on the door, a little more tack weld on it to make sure it really doesn't move. But now we're going to move on to figuring out the lower bar, kind of verify, and you can see I had to get out the Sawzall to create some more room because I don't like putting any kind of bend one way and then bend back the other direction for the door bars. I'm trying to give the bar, like if the bar takes a hit, I want it pushing the load straight into the main hoop instead of if it has a bend in towards the driver's seat and then back towards the main hoop. In my mind, it could fold on that bend that goes back towards the main hoop and potentially push the bar out or in towards the seat. So trying to get everything as straight as we can possibly get it as far as the load path goes. And you saw me use a little bit of tape there. It's kind of one of my normal deals where I'll use tape to kind of place some bars and take a step back and look at it and see, you know, if I like the way things. And once we get that figured out, I polished up the tubes, drilled a hole that's inside of where the joint is for the door bars. So it's inside of that vertical tube, and that is to give the gases, like the air inside of the tube is expanding as it gets heated up. So I'm giving somewhere for those gases to go so that when I get close to completing the weld, the air is not trying to rush out at the hole where I am trying to weld. So welding some floor plates in now for the lower door bars, and let's get back to some live action and talk about it. All right, well, we're back for another day on the C5 Corvette roll cage build. I don't remember what all was in the last time lapse because I'm trying to splice this together over a few days, which is kind of one of the reasons why I haven't had a ton of videos yet, because we've all been thrashing on this, thrashing on Spencer's Camaro, cleaning up the shop. I had some other stuff to deal with a couple other projects, you know, shipping stuff in and out, and trying to handle all that stuff. But I'm gonna set up a time lapse on the welding of this. Let's see, we've got all these bars taken care of. They are nice and parallel with each other there. They're also parallel with each other on this plane. So pretty happy with how all of that is turning out. But a lot of work, definitely a lot of work. So once I get done with this, I saved the dimensions for these bars, like how long, how to make the bends, and I'm gonna copy them over there, and hopefully that side goes quite a bit faster than what this side did. You know, part of the process with this stuff is figuring out what you need to do and then when you can just copy it on the other side because the roll cage is nice and square. That saves us some time. So anyways, I'm gonna stop talking, get to work, do some time lapsing. Talk to you in a few. All right, well, here's another quick time lapse just on welding up all of these door bars. Thought it might be kind of interesting for you guys to see all the different positions that at least I get into when I'm welding on these cars. And it was kind of nice to have the lift to where I could lift the car up and down to get a little bit better angle on some spots. And you'll see me lift it up, put it down. And then also I get between the lift arms to try and get to the angles that I need to get everything completely welded. And luckily, I'm able to 100% weld all of these joints so that when we remove the whole cage from the car, I know that none of that is going to move around at all because it's already fully welded. So if we could do that with every single joint in the car, we would, but as tight as we have fit the cage to the body structure, that's simply not possible. And up there at the very front of the A-pillar bar, there is actually a threaded boss that is welded to the cage, but also is able for the door hinge to bolt to it. And actually the original factory sheet metal out there, we made a spacer that's also threaded, so where the door hinge bolts to it, it bolts all that together and makes the door really solid. All right, so fast forward a couple of days, and you can see we've gotten all the door bars welded in on both sides, including this bar here, which I'm going to take the roof off here in just a second and show you how all of the bracing worked out in the roof and how my mind thinks as far as load sharing across the car. But yeah, Drew's been kicking butt on this cage, and yeah, it's gotten a little surface rusty because that's just Florida. And hopefully we've got something in the works for getting rid of some of the humidity in the shop. See more about that in another video later. But yeah, it's something that's kind of unfortunate that when we do have the open shop, I mean, these were all polished like you saw in the video, and us rubbing up on them and just the humidity in the air, doesn't take long before they're all rusty and they don't look all that great. But if you notice, we're only tack welded down here at these joints because we still have the idea of taking the whole cage out of the car, taking it over to the powder coater, and they're gonna powder coat this whole thing. We'll tape up the bottom 2 inches or so of each landing point, and then we'll weld it back in the car once we get it back from powder coat. So the bar that's out here across the front, that is just so that nothing moves when we take it out of the car, because there's really nothing to support those from moving in or out. And like I said in another video, we have some more welding to do on these outside spots, especially down on that bottom one. And when you weld to something, it'll usually pull towards the weld, especially if there's any kind of gap. And sometimes I'm not even necessarily talking about a gap between the actual tubes themselves, but let's find a good joint to talk about it. So this joint right here, for example, the tubes probably touch each other back here, but the welder is not going to reach in that far. Like, it's going to be welding out here, the welder and the filler rod, and essentially that becomes kind of like a gap, and it's trying to pull these tubes together because you're filling an airspace with weld. Now we're trying to get to where we get it welded as close as we can to where the tubes are contacting each other, but that's just not the way it goes all the time. And even with something like any angled joint, say even here, you know, to a lesser extent, when we weld here, it's trying to pull that back closed, and it can change the shape of the cage a little bit when we take it out of the car and it's not welded to the jig anymore, the car being the jig. But let's pop the roof off of this thing, show you guys everything that's happened since the first part of the video. And I did kind of miss a couple of days filming on this car. Just happens sometimes. So we'll show you guys the final product of the roll cage in this car and then tell you what we've got to do before we take it to powder coat. Ready to get the roof off this thing? All right, so there's our Trick Roof X, which you can see it's got a nice long arc to it, which we used our roll bender over there on the bench.
Hold on, you gotta spin it.
Gotta spin it. It's got roller bearings in it. If only it was that easy when we were actually rolling the tubes.
Yeah.
That thing's a workout, which I do know they have a power option for it. We don't use it a whole lot, and plus we get a little exercise in the shop if we use it just the way it comes with the manual setup. Anyway, back to the cage. So now you can kind of see what I was talking about in a few videos back about how the load sharing happens, at least in my brain. You know, this bar comes up here, goes across into there, goes into that roof diagonal, and then down the window opening, and then down right into the floor. These were a little bit of a compromise. Like ideally, this would be more of a 45 here, and then this bar would be further down, but this is the viewing window out of the front of the car. So we had the roof on and off a couple of times to test fit all this, and had Grant come sit in the car and make sure that it was to an acceptable level of interference with the viewing window. Typically, cars like this have some kind of window banner across the top. Usually it's a sponsor windshield banner for the series. And that's why these are still just tacked in. Actually need to polish the rust off of it and final weld those. And also from the front of this, we're gonna have some kind of brace, might be tubular, might be a piece of angle that we kind of cut and modify. And it's gonna come out and have a hole in it to mount the roof right through the windshield relief here. So the bolts that hold the window down on the top are going to be holding the roof down onto the car. We also need to do something with our dash and firewall. And as you can kind of tell, there's nothing for the lower part of the windshield. So we're probably going to tie that to the cage and it'll all come out and get powder coated, and then we'll have filler panels that bolt in to these once we start making, once we start making the firewall to connect back to where the dash, it's not really a dash bar, it's actually the bottom of the windshield, but that tube, we saved the factory tube somewhere around here, but factory tube comes in there, and we're going to tie it probably to the cage, and all of it will be one big assembly, and then the firewall pieces will bolt in, and they'll have a nice metal firewall instead of the composite firewall. This thing's getting close. At least getting close to taking everything out powder coat. Probably another week or so of fab work on it. And you can kind of see that Drew's seat mount, we used the factory holes, but also added some steel bar reinforcement there and on the back. The seat belt anchors are going to tie to those too for the lap belts. And we did a little bar here to catch the shoulder straps. So got to final weld those in. But yeah, lots and lots of progress on this thing, and it is getting real close. But that's gonna wrap it up for this video. Appreciate everybody watching and subscribing, following along. It means a lot. It means a lot to me, especially because, I mean, just to have, all you guys watching and commenting and enjoying the videos and commenting about how you enjoy the videos, that's really cool. Because, I never had the idea that the channel would do as well as it's done since we started it. So anyways, I got to get back to work, edit this video and get it up. See you guys in the next one.